Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our interview among your busy schedule of the discussion. So I would like to begin with a question that's sort of generic, just because our theme today is called New International Relations. And for your role, what is your understanding of this idea of a new international relations?
Well, I think we are in a new world. Everybody knows that, everybody is aware of that, and that the world has changed in terms of who are the actors, what is the agenda, what is the new globalization process.
Absolutely.
So everybody is aware of that. The problem is that we should try to understand and to prepare the world to the new challenges. And so we cannot do that by using the old institution. We have to adapt the old institution to the new ones in order to respond with more efficiency to the new risk and the new threats.
Absolutely. However, I'd like to ask maybe about the obstacles in this, because a lot of countries now back in Europe or the US, a lot of countries are more of the giving countries. They give more aids. They're the ones that need to be, receiving refugees, and they're more putting more out there. And there are countries that are more on the end to receive, which is easier to say, we'd like to be a part of this shared future. So, what is your understanding to?
Well, what is the real, I would say, main obstacles is the lack of political will. I think the leadership in the world, not to figure out who is the one who is not complaining to the challenges. Generally speaking, there is lack of political will to understand the new world and to work with a solidarity spirit.
Okay.
We have lost. If we talk about the European Union, we have lost the founding father spirit that were working together and helping each other, putting the common objectives. And now, no, everybody wants to retreat and withdraw to their national boundaries. But that is not going to succeed, because that's the old world. We are in a new world. So you cannot, put walls on fences in the borders, because today knowledge, science, discoveries, they have no borders.
Absolutely.
And so to go through all that, so the sooner political leaders start to understand that they have to meet and to say, well, we are going in the wrong direction. So we have to stop and to establish some rules, some regulation, in order that we can live together. Because in this kind of confusion, nobody is winning.
Yes.
We are losing, all of us. So time has come to put an end to this, let's say, transition phase and going to a final project for understanding that the new world order should be established.
I very much agree with that, and I think China is especially trying to take that political will to push things forward, and there's the Belt and Road, and there's also the willingness to work together closely with Africa to build something new, and again with the narrative of the shared future. But China is often actually criticized in the West by this idea of trying to be a superpower, or they're trying to take over. So it's sort of this dilemma of we want to do good things, but sometimes it's not well taken. What's sort of your
I think that can be, resolved by dialogue to intense and to explain each other. I think what China is doing is extremely positive, because he's bringing a new kind of multilateralism. Well, today, world is divided to those who are defending go back to the old times and to have a unilateralism, isolationism, or the others that, like China or the European Union, others that want to maintain multilateralism. But to maintain multilateralism is not the answer, because all multilateralism is not producing the good result.
Yes.
So we have to reform today's multilateralism. And China is bringing new ideas, like the One Belt, One Road, this common shared common future, community of a shared future. So we have to study, work together, understanding together how we can work together. And I think that can be done through dialogue and cooperation. You have to look face to face.
Right.
And tell the truth, your problem. And that is diplomacy. That has been the art of diplomacy throughout history. So diplomacy has been invented to really overcome the problems and the crises. But today we are not using diplomacy. We are using threat, social media, confusion, fake news, but we are not using diplomats and diplomacy. We are a lack of diplomacy today.
Lack of that inclusiveness, the dialogue, as you were speaking, the idea of building something together, that there's a process.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Ni hao.
Ni hao ma.
First of all, I would like to tell you thank you for accepting our invitation today.
Okay.
And we are here for an important event as being participating to the Taihu Cultural Forum, which is aiming to address what is the new international relations today and a new concept of where we have to take into account common shared through the mankind. And I will start off with the question of asking you, what is the definition of the new international relations?
New international relation, there is no definition.
Okay.
To be honest. Because everybody is looking at it. The Chinese looking different way than the American, than the European, than the Middle East. So because the international law in general is not really recognized officially. It is recognized just for the not for the substance but for the appearances. Everybody is member of the Security Council, or those are above the law. So nobody can speak about international law for them. If you go to the court, High Court of International High Court, also has advisory opinion, so they don't have really to implement the judgment. So practically, the international law had to be respected by the will of the member countries. If not, you cannot imply it. It's not different than the internal law. That is the main difference between this. So that is, we say new international law, new international order. Okay, it has some development, but there is no implementation. So the law without implementation is nearly none.
Right. So, but in comparison, when we talk about new international relations, we are comparing, obviously, an old pattern. Let's say before the Cold War, during the Cold War, and after the 90s. However, right now in the First World, especially in the European Union, there's voices that are rising regarding populism, nationalism. Those voices might be threatening a more inclusiveness about globalization, because they want to rise the borders, they want to rise their own sentiment of their own nation. Therefore, how can we still call this a new international relations if at the same time we're going back to the old pattern? Are we here facing a neo-realism in terms of international affairs, or are we facing a new multilateralism?
It is a new order, let me say, and why I'm saying it is a new order. The old order was dissolved after the 16 48. That is the main convention signed after the war between Catholic and Protestant.
Right.
Then came the principle of sovereignty. The principle of sovereignty started to be cut into pieces after the UN system and the charter and the so-called humanitarian intervention and the humanitarian law and human rights conventions and so on. So after the dissolution or dissolving of called Soviet Empire, then became one superpower. Then for a while came what we call, and China and Egypt and many countries in the developing countries, we want multi-pole system. So that is what we can, as a developing country, my country and your country and China, we would like to have multipolar system. So not to have one pole, or one or two. If the two, they conspire against you. If they are one, they will. You cannot talk to them. So if it is multipolar system, Chinese polar, European polar, Arab polar, Middle East, Russian polar, so then we have to choose. If you have multi-choice, then you have more confident and more better choice.
Right, I totally understand. Well, actually, I would like to follow up on the Middle Eastern case. Knowing that you're coming from Egypt, I would like to have your perspective on how the new Egypt today, after the revolutions, after the fall of Mubarak and then Morsi, how the new Egypt today is applying its new IR policies with the East, which is China, for example, or Asia. Is there a shift in the policies, or how do you interpret this on your own perspective?
For China-Egypt relations, there is shift in substance, but
okay.
not in the appearances. Because in the form or the appearance, during Mubarak, we have good relations with China. During Nasser, he is the first one to recognize China. During Sadat, China sided with Egypt against the Arab countries when we have the peace agreement. So with China, there was continuous good relations. The difference now we have in the substance with Sisi, more practical policy, because when he signed an agreement, he tried to implement it. During previous presidents, they signed agreements, but they didn't implement it. So that is the main difference.
So would you say it's more effective today?
Yes.
Okay.
More effective.
I understand. So to conclude our interview, I would like to focus then more on China itself. And as being part of this cultural forum, it's also a way for China to develop its what's it called soft power. How do you interpret again the definition of a soft power under China, and how a country like Egypt, but let's say developing countries, the Arab world or the African nations, how do they welcome the soft power from China in your perspective?
We in Egypt in particular, but mostly in the Arab countries, we believe in the soft power, because our source of strength is the soft power. As you know, Egypt has the intellectual development from the many years before the revolution and so on. It has more influence, moral influence, not moral influence. That is the soft power. We have the Egyptian labor, Egyptian intellectuals, Egyptian professors, Egyptian judges in many Arab countries. So that is the soft power.
Right.
China today is doing the same. It has, as somebody mentioned, that 1 million Chinese out of China, helping other countries. That is a soft power. That the soft power people also became jealous from it. The American are criticizing the relation between China and Africa and say, oh, this is a new imperialism by Chinese. But practically no. Because when the Europeans were there, they left the Africa without being developed. Now the Chinese, they develop roads, building conferences,
Right.
hospitals, schools. Europeans, they didn't do this.
That's true.
For 100, they divided Africa in 1884, 85. Divided. They have a conference to divide Africa. Frankly, China, they never have something such a thinking.
I agree.
So that is the difference. Same we have as Egypt in particular with Arab countries or with African countries, we consider they are brothers. We used to send our teachers to many Arab countries and we pay their salary. So we didn't get anything for the Gulf regions and they recognize it up till now.
Okay.
We send doctors, we pay for them. In Africa, we have a special fund to help African countries. We pay for our teachers, our scholars, our engineers, and so on. And we pay it as a present, as a gift, as assistance to other countries which they cannot afford to have all these.
Wow, well, I will end up this interview by focusing on this, the correlation and the similarity between Egypt and China when it comes into the soft power, because Egypt is not just about the Arab nations, but it's also about the history of Egyptology and its own civilization, just like China.
Yes.
And just like Egypt right now in terms of, let's say, the intellectual richness that your country has through Azhar, for example, or even through what you say, the court system. Many of greatest judges around Arab nations come from Egypt, such as China in terms of constitution. The model of constitutional Chinese politics is quite trying to be exported in the other 8 Southeast Asian countries. That is a great correlation and mirror that we can draw here.
You know, the difference today between the soft power used by China and soft power used by Egypt, the economic problem in China is different than the economic problem in Egypt.
Of course.
So after being magnanimous and for all other African and Arab countries, we limited our assistance. And our soft power there, they are helping, but they are getting the salaries from the host country. Originally, we used to pay for them.
Okay, I see what you mean now.
China, no, they help through this and they pay for them. So that is the difference. Or they give a soft loans, something like this. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gomal, for attending our NSF. Jalal, it's easier, for attending our interview, and I hope that Egyptian and Chinese relation will be able to strengthen and grow more in the future, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much and wish you good luck.
شكرا كثير.